Michael Woodhouse.
Well, Mr Speaker, if Mr Davis had finished at the 5-minute mark, that might have been one of the finest speeches of the day. And we may come from different ends of the political spectrum, but in matters relating to the pain of loss and certain referees, including Mr Barnes, I think we have much more in common than I thought. But my pain goes back to 1967, when the great man was sent from the field at Murrayfield, when I was the ripe old age of about 18 months old. And I don't think Mr Kelleher from Ireland will ever, or has ever, entered New Zealand since. Members have spoken about this being the largest event in the world in 2011, and I was particularly interested in Mr Clendon's comments in respect of whether or not we need this legislation, by saying that we had, quote, significant experience in running events of this type, and in particular rugby. Well, I don't think I agree with that, and casting my mind back to 1987, I was playing Premier Rugby here in Wellington for Western Suburbs when the 1987 Rugby World Cup took place, and the amateur nature of rugby was very evident in the organising committee of the Rugby World Cup. I noticed we're going to need 7,000 volunteers for 2011 Rugby World Cup. That was probably more than attended many of those games. The ceremony was a very perfunctory affair, a few speeches and a kick-off. I think it was on a Wednesday, in fact, and then everybody went home and did what they did. I think we're going to see a completely different event next year, beyond the scope and scale of anything we've seen in the past, and we're getting a little bit of an insight into it by watching the FIFA World Cup in South Africa at the moment. But I think the more relevant one was actually the 2006 World Cup, Soccer Cup in Germany, where in Berlin, in the plaza that led up to the Brandenburg Gate, they turned that magnificent area into a virtual tent city, or a marquee city, of events, of big screens, so that the fans of each country could watch the events. And of course there was probably quite a few licensed premises in that place as well, but it was a terrific success. I also want to pick up on the caveats from Mr Clendon and Mr Twyford about the issues around liquor licensing and this piece of legislation, because it seems to me on first reading that many of the concerns that are expressed by those two members actually have been addressed in the bill, because it talks about the eligibility to hold an on-licence before you can even apply for a special licence. The right to object is still evident, and substantially all the requirements of the Sale of Liquor Act still exist under this bill. And what this bill seems to do is turbocharge the consenting and Sale of Liquor Act licensing process at a very appropriate time. Yes, Mr Mallow said we don't know what we don't know, and I think only now we're starting to come to understand what opportunities exist to market the country, to market business, to market tourism around this magnificent event. And so it is going to be necessary with places like Oamaru and Masterton to perhaps, at reasonably short notice, pick up on opportunities and not be arbitrarily slowed down by consenting or licensing processes, albeit that they still need to be done in a reasonable and fair way within the existing constraints of the law. So I look forward to this speedy passage. I certainly look forward to the captain of the All Blacks holding aloft the Rugby World Cup in October next year.
Thank you, members. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary will say no. The ayes have it. Party vote. I'll ask the clerk for a party vote. Order. Votes are taken in silence. I'll ask the clerk to conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
58 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
No. 43 votes in favour.
Green Party.
9 votes opposed.
ACT New Zealand.
5 votes in favour.
Māori Party. Progressive.
1 vote in favour.
United Future.
1 vote in favour.
Members, the ayes are 113, the noes are 9. The motion is agreed to.
Rugby World Cup 2011 Empowering Bill, first reading.
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.